The Bloom of Spring Lane by Everett Cole. Amelia Thornton stood at the edge of the ballroom, her gaze fixed on the polished floor, where couples swirled in time with the music. The candles flickered in their crystal holders, casting a warm glow over the assembled guests of London's finest families. She smoothed the folds of her pale blue gown, grateful for the small comfort of the familiar motion while everything else in her world had been turned upside down. "You appear most contemplative this evening, Miss Thornton," came a deep voice beside her. She turned to find Mr. James Crawford observing her with those penetrating gray eyes that seemed to see far more than she wished to reveal. At 36, he was considerably older than the young gentleman who typically sought her company, but there was something in his steady gaze that made her pulse quicken in a most disconcerting manner. "I find that observation often yields more pleasure than participation, Mr. Crawford," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. His mouth curved into a half-smile, an unusual sentiment for a young lady at her first London season. "Perhaps I am an unusual young lady." "That," he said quietly, "I do not doubt." The orchestra began a new tune, and Mr. Crawford extended his hand. "Would you honor me with this dance?" Amelia hesitated. Her aunt had warned her to be cautious around Mr. Crawford. He had made his fortune in trade, shipping, specifically, and while his wealth now rivaled that of many aristocrats, some still viewed him with suspicion. Yet there was something compelling about him that made her place her gloved hand in his. "I should warn you," she said as he led her to the floor, "I am not the most accomplished dancer. And I should warn you, Miss Thornton, that I am far more interested in sincerity than accomplishment." The dance brought them together, then apart, a rhythm of approach and retreat that seemed to mirror their conversation. When their hands touched, even through the barrier of gloves, Amelia felt a curious warmth spread through her. "Your family is recently arrived from Devonshire, I understand," Mr. Crawford said as they circled each other. "Yes, though I would hardly call it recent. We have been in London for 3 months now." "And how do you find town life compared to the country?" Amelia considered her answer carefully. "It is different. In Devonshire, one knows everyone and everything. Here, it seems I know no one and nothing." "Yet you observe," he reminded her. "I do, though I find myself frequently misinterpreting what I see." The dance brought them together again, and his voice lowered. "Perhaps you require a guide to London society." "Are you offering your services, Mr. Crawford?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. "I am hardly an insider myself," he admitted, "but sometimes an outsider's perspective can prove most illuminating." As the music concluded, he returned her to the edge of the ballroom where her aunt, Miss Winters, awaited with a pinched expression. "Mr. Crawford," her aunt acknowledged stiffly. "Mrs. Winters," he bowed, "your niece is a credit to your guidance." After he departed, Aunt Winters wasted no time in her admonishment. "Amelia, you must be more discerning in your choice of dance partners. Mr. Crawford may be wealthy, but his connections are questionable at best." "He seemed perfectly amiable to me," Amelia replied, watching his tall figure disappear into the crowd. "Amiable men are often the most dangerous," her aunt said firmly. "Remember why we are here. Your father's debts will not pay themselves, and a favorable match is our only hope." The reminder of her father's financial troubles, and her role in salvaging the family's fortunes, dampened Amelia's spirits for the remainder of the evening. She danced with Lord Pembroke's second son, a pleasant if somewhat dull young man, and with Sir William Hastings, whose wandering hands made her wish for the dance to end quickly. Neither gentleman sparked even a fraction of the interest that her brief encounter with Mr. Crawford had kindled. Later that week, Amelia accompanied her aunt to Hyde Park for the fashionable hour. The spring air was crisp and the trees were just beginning to show their new leaves. Ladies in pastel-colored dresses and gentlemen in their finest attire strolled along the pathways or rode along Rotten Row, seeing and being seen. "Miss Thornton," a voice called, and Amelia turned to see Mr. Crawford approaching on horseback. He dismounted and handed the reins to his groom before joining them. "What a pleasant surprise," he said, bowing to both ladies. "Mrs. Winters, Miss Thornton, may I accompany you on your walk?" Aunt Winters looked as though she had bitten into something sour but could not refuse without appearing rude. "If you wish, Mr. Crawford." As they walked, Mr. Crawford directed his conversation primarily to Amelia's aunt, asking after her health and commenting on mutual acquaintances. Amelia noticed how skillfully he managed to put her aunt at ease, drawing her into conversation about topics dear to her heart. By the time they had completed their circuit of the park, Miss Winters was almost smiling. "I understand you are attending Lady Harrington's musical evening tomorrow," Mr. Crawford said as they prepared to part. "Indeed we are," Aunt Winters replied. "Do you share an appreciation for music, Mr. Crawford?" "I confess I know little of it technically, but I find great pleasure in listening. Miss Thornton, are you musically inclined?" Amelia felt her cheeks warm under his direct gaze. "I play the pianoforte, though not nearly well enough to perform at Lady Harrington's." "I shall look forward to hearing you play some day, nevertheless," he said, and there was something in his tone that suggested he meant it sincerely. After he took his leave, Amelia braced herself for her aunt's criticism, but to her surprise, Miss Winters merely observed, "He is not as unrefined as I had expected." The following evening at Lady Harrington's, Amelia found herself seated beside Mr. Crawford during the performances. The proximity made it difficult to concentrate on the music. She was acutely aware of his every movement, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his hand rested only inches from hers on the armrest between them. During a pause between performances, he leaned slightly toward her. "I must confess something, Miss Thornton." "Oh?" she whispered, conscious of the other guests around them. "I find these events rather tedious. The music is pleasant enough, but the atmosphere is stifling." The honesty of his admission surprised her into a small laugh, which she quickly covered with her hand. "That is hardly the sentiment one is supposed to express at such gatherings. And yet it is the truth. Would you not prefer to be elsewhere?" Amelia considered the question. "I suppose it would depend on the alternative." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than was proper. Indeed. The next performer began and they fell silent, but Amelia could no longer focus on the music. Her mind was filled with questions about what alternatives Mr. Crawford might have in mind. As the weeks passed, their paths continued to cross at various social events. Each encounter left Amelia more intrigued by the enigmatic Mr. Crawford. Unlike the other gentlemen of her acquaintance, he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. One afternoon, while chaperoned by her maid, Amelia encountered Mr. Crawford in the bookshop on Bond Street. He was examining a volume of poetry when she entered, and his face brightened at the sight of her. "Miss Thornton, what a delightful coincidence." "Mr. Crawford," she curtsied. "I did not expect to find you among the poetry shelves." "Ah, you have discovered my secret weakness," he said, returning the book to its place. "And what brings you here today?" "I was hoping to find something new to read. The evenings can be quite long when one is not engaged for dinner or the theater." He nodded thoughtfully. "May I recommend something? I recently finished a collection of essays by a lady author that I found most illuminating." He selected a slim volume and handed it to her. "Miss Wollstonecraft's views on education and the position of women in society are quite revolutionary. I would be interested to hear your thoughts on the matter." Amelia glanced at the book with surprise. This is hardly the sort of reading material one expects a gentleman to recommend to a lady. "I believe you would find it stimulating," he said. "Unless, of course, you prefer the usual fare of romantic novels and poetry." There was a challenge in his eyes that Amelia could not resist. "I shall read it with great interest, Mr. Crawford." As they parted outside the shop, he said, "Perhaps we might discuss it when next we meet." "I should like that very much." That evening, Amelia began reading the book in the privacy of her bedchamber. The ideas presented were indeed revolutionary, and in many ways, alarming. Yet she found herself nodding in agreement with many of the author's arguments. Women were capable of reason and intellectual thought. They deserved education beyond the ornamental arts. When she next encountered Mr. Crawford, at a dinner party hosted by mutual acquaintances, she was eager to share her impressions. They found themselves momentarily apart from the other guests, standing by the windows that overlooked the garden. "I have been reading the book you recommended," she said quietly. "And?" His eyes were intent on her face. "I find the author's arguments compelling, if somewhat radical. Do you agree that women should be educated for independence rather than merely to please men?" Amelia glanced around to ensure they were not overheard. "I believe there is merit in both purposes. Surely one can be educated and still wish to bring pleasure to those one cares for." A slow smile spread across his face. "An elegant compromise, Miss Thornton. May I ask why you would read such a work? It seems an unusual choice for a gentleman." "I have a young sister," he replied. "She is exceptionally bright, and I have ensured she received an education equal to that of any young man. I could not bear to see her intelligence stifled by convention." This revelation added a new dimension to Amelia's understanding of Mr. Crawford. He was not merely wealthy and charming, he was progressive in his thinking, valuing women's minds in a way few men did. "Your sister is fortunate," Amelia said softly. "As would be any woman who shared my life," he replied, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The moment was interrupted by her aunt, who appeared with a determined expression. "Amelia, Lord Pembroke is looking for you. I believe he wishes to secure your hand for the next dance." As Amelia was led away, she glanced back to find Mr. Crawford watching her, his expression unreadable. Lord Pembroke proved to be as dull in conversation as she remembered, droning on about his horses and hounds while they danced. Amelia nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, but her thoughts remained with Mr. Crawford and the intriguing glimpse she had gained into his character. Later that evening, as they were preparing to depart, Mr. Crawford approached her once more. "Miss Thornton, I wonder if I might call on you tomorrow afternoon. There is a matter I wish to discuss with you." Before Amelia could respond, her aunt intervened. "Mr. Crawford, while we appreciate your attention, I must inform you that Amelia's schedule is quite full tomorrow. Perhaps another time." The carriage ride home was tense. "Aunt, why did you refuse Mr. Crawford's request to call? I would have liked to continue our conversation." Mrs. Winters sighed heavily. "Amelia, I have been patient with your fascination for Mr. Crawford, but it is time for plain speaking. He is not a suitable match for you." "Because he made his fortune in trade." "Because he cannot offer you the security you require. Yes, he is wealthy now, but fortunes built on commerce can crumble overnight. Lord Pembroke's son, on the other hand, comes from an established family with land and titles." "Lord Pembroke's son has the intellect of a fence post," Amelia muttered. "Intellect does not maintain a household or secure one's position in society," her aunt retorted. "Your father's debts have left us in a precarious position. We cannot afford to indulge in romantic notions." Amelia turned to look out the window, fighting back tears of frustration. She understood the reality of her situation all too well. Her father's death had left them with little besides debts and the goodwill of relatives. An advantageous marriage was her duty to her mother and younger siblings who remained in Devonshire, depending on her success in London. The next day, despite her aunt's prohibition, Mr. Crawford called at their rented townhouse. Mrs. Winters reluctantly allowed him into the drawing room, where Amelia sat working on her embroidery. "Mr. Crawford," her aunt said coolly, "this is an unexpected pleasure." "Mrs. Winters, Miss Thornton," he bowed. "I apologize for calling without a prior arrangement, but the matter I wish to discuss could not wait." Amelia set aside her needlework, her curiosity piqued. Mr. Crawford seemed unusually serious, his customary easy manner replaced by a certain tension. "I recently returned from a meeting with my solicitor," he began, regarding some investments I made several years ago. "Investments that have proven most fortuitous." Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Indeed?" "Yes, in fact, I find myself in possession of certain documents that may be of interest to your family." He removed a folded packet from his coat pocket and handed it to Mrs. Winters. Amelia watched as her aunt opened the packet and scanned its contents, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock. "These are your brother-in-law's debts," "Yes," Mr. Crawford confirmed. "Or rather they were. I have purchased them from his creditors." Amelia stood, her heart pounding. "You purchased my father's debts. Why would you do such a thing?" Mr. Crawford turned to her, his eyes softening. "Because they were causing distress to someone I have come to care for deeply." "And what do you intend to do with them?" Miss Winters asked sharply. "That," he said, "depends entirely on Miss Thornton." Amelia felt the weight of his gaze and understood the implication of his words. He was offering to forgive her father's debts, but at what price? "I should like to speak with Miss Thornton alone, if I may," Mr. Crawford said. Mrs. Winters hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and curiosity. "I shall be in the adjoining room with the door open," she finally said, withdrawing reluctantly. When they were as alone as convention would allow, Mr. Crawford moved closer to Amelia. "I fear I have handled this poorly," he said quietly. "It was not my intention to appear as though I were purchasing your affection." "Then what was your intention, sir?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To remove an obstacle, Your aunt has made it clear that she considers me unsuitable due to my background in trade. I had hoped that, by demonstrating my financial security and my sincere desire to help your family, I might overcome her objections. And what is it you wish for in return?" Mr. Crawford took a deep breath. "The opportunity to court you properly, Miss Thornton, to see if the connection I feel between us might grow into something more substantial." Amelia studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "And if it does not? If I find that my feelings do not match yours? Then the debts remain forgiven, and we part as friends. I am not in the business of trading financial security for unwilling affection." The sincerity in his eyes touched her deeply. Here was a man who had risen through his own merits, who valued education and independence in women, and who now offered her family relief from their burdens without demanding her hand in return. "You are unlike any gentleman I have ever known, Mr. Crawford." "James," he said softly. "My name is James." "James," she repeated, the intimacy of using his given name sending a thrill through her. "I believe I would very much like to be courted by you." His smile was like the dawn breaking. "Then I shall speak to your aunt immediately and secure her permission." The conversation with Mrs. Winters proved challenging but ultimately successful. Mr. Crawford, James, outlined his intentions and the conditions of his forgiveness of the debts. Amelia's aunt, though initially suspicious, could not deny the advantages of such an arrangement, particularly when it became clear that Amelia was genuinely drawn to the gentleman. In the weeks that followed, James called regularly at their townhouse. They took chaperoned walks in the park, attended the theater and musical evenings together, and engaged in long conversations about books, ideas, and their hopes for the future. With each meeting, Amelia's affection for him deepened, as did her appreciation for his intellect and character. One afternoon, as they strolled through Kensington Gardens, James broached a subject that had been on his mind. "I have been considering purchasing a country estate," he said. "Something not too distant from London, but far enough to escape the city's noise and crowds." "That sounds lovely," Amelia replied. "Do you grow tired of town life?" "Not tired, exactly. But I find myself increasingly drawn to the idea of a more peaceful existence." He glanced at her. "I should value your opinion on any properties I consider." The implication was clear, and Amelia felt her cheeks grow warm. "I would be honored to offer my thoughts, though I confess I know little about evaluating estates." "You know what makes a house feel like a home," he said simply. "That knowledge is far more valuable than understanding the intricacies of tenant farms and crop rotations." As they continued their walk, Amelia's mind filled with images of a future she had never dared to imagine, a life with a man who respected her mind, who saw her as a partner rather than a possession, who had shown by his actions that her happiness mattered to him. "You are quiet," James observed. "I was thinking about how differently things have turned out than I expected when I came to London," she admitted. "Disappointed?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "Quite the opposite," she assured him. "I came seeking a marriage of convenience, and instead—" "Instead?" he prompted when she hesitated. Amelia gathered her courage. "Instead, I find myself contemplating a marriage of both convenience and affection." James stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Amelia," he said, using her given name for the first time, "are you saying what I hope you are?" "I believe I am," she whispered, aware of her maid discreetly trailing behind them. "Then allow me to be equally clear," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I love you. Not for your connections or your beauty, though you are indeed beautiful. I love your mind, your spirit, your kindness. I wish to marry you if you will have me." The simplicity and sincerity of his declaration moved her deeply. "I will have you, James. With all my heart." His smile was radiant, though he maintained a proper distance. "Then I shall speak to your aunt today and make my intentions official." As they walked back toward the carriage, their steps light with shared joy, Amelia reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to London seeking security, and had found something far more precious, a love based on mutual respect and understanding, a future bright with promise. James kept hold of her gloved hand as he helped her into the carriage, the pressure of his fingers communicating what words could not in such a public setting. As they drove through the bustling streets of London, Amelia's heart was full. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a partnership of equals, bound by love rather than necessity. When they reached her aunt's townhouse, James helped her down from the carriage, his touch lingering just a moment longer than propriety strictly allowed. "Until this evening," he murmured. "Until this evening," she echoed, her smile matching his. As she watched him walk away, Amelia felt a sense of certainty that had eluded her throughout her life. In a society that valued women primarily for their connections and appearance, she had found a man who valued her for herself, her thoughts, her principles, her very essence. And in doing so, she had discovered her own worth beyond the confines of convention. That evening, when James called to formally request her hand from her aunt, Amelia's answer was unwavering. This was not merely a marriage of convenience or a solution to her family's financial troubles. It was a choice made from the deepest part of her heart, a beginning rather than an ending. And as James slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, sealing their engagement with a proper kiss upon her hand, Amelia knew that she had found not just security, but happiness, a bloom that would continue to flourish in all the seasons of their life together.